metaphysics of the performative male, in a way, are still striving towards the recognition of one's intellectual, artistic, taste-related merit. And I respect that.
Yeah.
The chud and the performative male are really different sides of the same coin.
No, agreed. And just for the audience, if they don't know what a chud is.
Yeah.
So performative male, everyone knows what that is. You know, like
Yeah.
baggy jeans, overshirt,
Feminist
matcha,
literature,
feminist
matcha,
literature,
you know?
6'2". You know,
Yeah,
is that guy?
I'm 6'2", I love
I'm
feminist
6'2".
literature.
Yeah. Aurangzeb era Mughal art. What Aurangzeb did was he took the Mughal Karkhanas, which were the royal centers, the royal atelier, basically. He took them and he said, you're not making Mughal miniatures anymore. You're not making faces anymore. You're not making scenes with dancing courtesans anymore. I'm a lot more orthodox. You're going to make ultra-traditional Islamic art, which has a lot of emphasis on clean lines, geometry, and representation of divine order through the golden ratio or symmetry, or however you want to take it. I made this needle like Burj Khalifa. Now the next guy, the next trillionaire sovereign wealth fund is trying to make a needle that's even thinner and even taller.
Yeah.
There is an ingenuity there.
Yeah.
There's a marvel of human engineering there.
Yeah.
Right? For sure. Marvel of human
Yeah,
achievement.
I love the Burj Khalifa.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially at night time when it's like shining and stuff. There's a performativeness in our calling out of performative males.
Yeah. Performative maleception.
Yeah.
Where, you know, if we see it, we're kind of like, I'm different. I'm not like those guys.
I'm not like a performative
Yeah.
type, you know. I'm
not like other guys.
Yeah, I'm actually authentic. you
I'm
know?
very different.
Yeah, but then we realize the contradictions in the entire idea of calling out the performance.
I don't wear baggy jeans. I wear Japanese denim.
Why are you going? Why are you going
How much you get?
Yeah, no,
You get.
but I think a performative male, right? I think ultimately it's a very, very noble, and I actually appreciate the attempt for some guys to, you know, be this performative male thing in a world that's like shitting on them. I think there's a positive initiative on their part, and I think the positive initiative on their part is that these are a bunch of guys who are trying to be recognized on the merits of their intellectual capabilities, their
Cultural awareness.
their cultural awareness.
There's a civilizational aspect to it. Like,
there's a civilizational aspect to it, you know. There's a
I'm the quintessential modern man.
Yeah, even though like these guys, the manifestation of this pursuit is coming out in this very materialistic, you know, superficial NPC form. The metaphysics of the performative male, in a way, are still striving towards the recognition of one's intellectual or artistic taste-related merits, and I respect that.
Yeah.
But the more I think about it, right, the more I see that the chud and the performative male are really different sides of the same coin.
No, agreed. And just for the audience, if they don't know what a chud is.
Yeah.
So performative male, everyone knows what that is. You know, like baggy jeans, overshirt, matcha, feminist literature, 6'2". You know, is that guy?
I'm 6'2", I love feminist
6'2".
literature.
Yeah. The chud is, you know, in mainstream culture, kind of the diametric opposite. But we don't really think it's all that different, because the chud is like that guy. Like in the West, it'll be someone who's like, oh, the West has fallen. We need to reclaim our civilization.
I claim aristocratic value. You know?
And we were the Romans. You know,
we were the Romans. You know,
it's that guy.
It's a guy who has, like, you know, the picture of a Greek statue as his profile picture on Instagram. You know, and he's got like heart Plato, heart. You know, Aristotle in his bio. You know. They're two sides of the same coin.
To like Crusader literature and stuff like that. So like, you know, that's
the West has fallen.
There's that guy. We'll put a picture up. We'll put a picture up of both just to give you a comparison.
Yeah.
And you're gonna be like, oh, like, you know, for young people today, these are diametric opposites. These are the guys at war, but they're the same guy.
It's the same guy.
It's the same person.
It's the same guy. The chud and the performative male are both, even though the iteration of it is very materialistic, it's very, very, you know, based in the, you know, in virtue signaling in a way, their psychological kind of motivations lie in the same thing.
And they both aspire to good virtues. Like,
they both do.
So
they really do.
So they've got an intersection where they're saying we're both culturally well placed to harness and develop our civilizational values.
Yeah.
Right? One says quintessential modern man, that's a performative male. One says, oh, I'm the inheritor of I'm the inheritor of this incredible civilization, whether it's the Romans or anything, right? And that's the chud.
Yeah, and that's the chud, yeah.
So you're saying that the chud and the performative male are on different ends of the social spectrum, but they're both essentially
aspiring to the same thing. Yeah.
And which is why we need some sort of chud and performative male unity.
Yeah. I think there's a reconciliation to be found here. And I think it could be a beautiful reconciliation if done.
So, look, okay, for example, if the performative male, he really holds in high regard postmodern literature, okay? He's like, yeah, man, I love Foucault. Yeah. Never read it, but I love it, right? Yeah. And the chud says, yeah, dude, Thomas Aquinas, bro, like, wo mere chacha ke mame. Stoics. Yeah, I love the Stoics, bro. Yeah. So, the unity is to be found in a pursuit of excellence in that vertical you've set for yourself. Yeah. Right? So, higher order engagement within that silo. We're not saying abandon your moral precepts, if you want to call them that. No. Right? But to engage with them on a higher level, so that you can engage with each other on a higher level, so that even if there is crossfire between the chuds and the performative males, unfortunate development.
There needs to be a mutual recognition that both of us aspire toward higher values, higher truths, higher consciousness. Yeah. There's a metaphysical, there's an intellectual yearning on both sides, and I deeply respect that. Even though it does come across as a little bit sarcastic, I mean it. I deeply do respect it.
In principle, my I think, and we both may agree on this, where it's like the pursuit, the end goal is noble. Yeah. But the struggle so far, man, that's superficial. Like that's not where it should be. If you're saying that, have you just latched on to a new social movement, this new ideology? You see something that's ascendant in your particular subaltern, and you're like, I'm going to attach myself to this. Yeah. Is it purely an identity game? Or are you really inspired by those ideals enough to be like, I'm going to apportion a certain part of my intellectual, physical life to this and try and become this person? I'm going to try and become the modern representation of a noble Roman soldier. I'm going to try and become the best version of a 6'2" matcha latte drinking, culturally aware male.
Yeah. Speaking of latching on to certain ideals of beauty and truth and goodness, be it the macho Renaissance man or be it the, enlightened modern man, whatever it is. I think it speaks to the fact that, throughout history, different cultures, different civilizations, different nations have really, really elevated certain expert qualities, certain virtues above the rest. And those are made manifest in the social orders that they instated, the culture, the art they created. Like, let's take, for example, the Romans. The Romans held virtus, virtus, as the highest of the goods. This was like courageousness, manliness, pride. And this kind of was made manifest in the way that they governed their empire. The Romans had the strongest military in the entire European peninsula for the better part of 600 years, from 200 BC to 400 AD, by the time the empire came crashing down. They conquered everyone, be it the Visigoths, the Gauls. Carthage was their biggest rival. And this virtus translated in the way that they practically ran their empire, this ethical quality, this virtue that they held at the highest esteem, You can kind of see the same thing in a place like America, America guiding virtues are, liberty, liberalism, entrepreneurship, innovation. And these ethos are manifested in the way America runs its empire today, where there's the epicenter of all technological innovation. They export the liberal secular doctrine to the rest of the world, So empires, civilizations, cultures have their very, very specific ethics that I'm not saying that the Americans aren't manly or the Romans aren't entrepreneurs. They do have, but as a grand narrative, there are definitely some virtues that stand above the others when looking at the civilizational character.
And there'll be a lot of criticism to say that, these virtues espoused by America or by Rome weren't lived up to by its adherents. And there may be truth to that, but that's kind of not the point. The point is, what did they profess?
Yeah.
What did they aspire towards? What did they dress themselves up as
Yeah.
and see as their ideal selves?
Yeah. And
That
what
is
did
the
they,
point.
what art did they create?
Yeah.
You know, the Roman artistic form always celebrated the, the masculine body, the, the military culture,
Yeah.
these type of things.
Yeah.
And American kind of iterated in the same way.
No, absolutely. So, and you see that, look, another classical example, the men of Athens and the men of Sparta. Right?
Yeah.
There's some variation, but those qualities of virility, strength, action,
Yeah.
all of those were held in high esteem. You see that in Greek sculptures. You see it in the excessively detailed representation of muscles, for instance. You see it in the Greeks holding physical beauty in large part, equating it with good.
Yeah.
Right? And saying that, yeah, if you are beautiful, you have an express relation to being good. And you see it in, take Yukio Mishima, for instance, right?
I love it.
You see the same thing.
Yeah.
By the way, like that's a genuine guy. Actually died for his principles, rebelled against the Japanese Empire, and then
And
was
killed
eventually killed.
seppuku and killed himself.
Seppuku,
Committed
yeah.
seppuku because
Yeah.
he couldn't fulfill his own ideals. He had real evidence.
Yeah, in Sun and Steel, you see that build-up of tension that it eventually results in that.
Yeah.
In that seppuku. And for me, as someone who's a lifelong student of some pretty dense literature, I never really understood what he was getting at in Sun and Steel in large part.
Yeah.
When he talked about, musculature, conveying values, conveying words, equating it with goodness, equating it with the right to live a beautiful life and die a beautiful death, I found it to be a particularly dense book. It's only like 80 or 90 pages. But from the Greek classical lens, you kind of find a vantage point to look at it and see what he means.
Yeah.
Right? The toil associated with creating a great painting is similar to the toil associated with crafting, sculpting, chiseling your body into something beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? That value, that particular way you envisage beauty is directly related to what you were saying earlier. Values of strength, being a conqueror, being a masculine man.
Yeah. That's
deeply interlinked.
Yeah, deeply interlinked. And beauty, beauty comes in many different forms and iterations, be it through art, be it through nature, be it through physical attractiveness, be it through all these things. But coming back to it, what all these different empires and civilizations have in common, even though there was the elevation of some subjective ethical qualities over the others in the Romans, it was manliness. In America, it was entrepreneurship. Three things are transcendental of everything, and that is goodness, beauty, and the truth. This isn't like an idea that I came up with by any means. Just putting that out there. This was actually expounded a lot on by Thomas Aquinas, Aristotle, Plato. These are the three examples of people who really saw these as transcending values.
Okay, so when we're particularly talking about empires and their association of their ethics, their professed ideals with the culture that they produce, with the art that they produce, that's a very important line to go down, because take Aurangzeb era Mughal.
Yeah.
Right? What Aurangzeb did was he took the Mughal Karkhanas, which were the royal centers, the royal atelier, basically.
Yeah.
He took them and he said, you're not making Mughal miniatures anymore. You're not making faces anymore. You're not making scenes with dancing courtesans anymore. I'm a lot more orthodox. You're going to make ultra-traditional Islamic art, which has a lot of emphasis on clean lines, geometry, and representation of divine order through the golden ratio or symmetry, or however you want to take it.
Yeah.
That says something very explicit about the character of Aurangzeb's reign as well.
Yeah.
That he was very orthodox, that he said that I prize divine creation above all else. My artisans should not be imitating it.
Yeah.
Hence, I'm going to do away with these pictorial depictions of people, of scenes of debauchery, of excess, and I'm going to bring in the simplest, most divinely attuned form of art that I possibly can.
Yeah.
You saw this orthodoxy in the rest of his reign as well.
Yeah.
Manifested in some bad ways as well. It manifested it, so in some people would say in some excesses as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that ethos that he brought to his art, he also brought to his rule And there is something inherently beautiful about the fact that he reconciled his aesthetic self with the vision of his rulership, and he saw that the fact that there's concordance in them shows that this was important to him.
Absolutely.
Right? And you get into this more, but in the modern world, the fact that you're always GDP maxing, the fact that you're always in this engine towards, we have to acknowledge him as the creator of that phrase, by the way.
Yeah.
The fact that you're always GDP maxing, it is no coincidence that your cities look as soulless and alien-like that they do. They have no concordance with the soul. They have no concordance with any ideals of classical beauty.
Yeah.
And just to round all of this off,
it doesn't have to be even classical beauty. It could even be a future-oriented
of beauty. Yeah.
Beauty nonetheless.
And anything that is inherently beautiful to people, that speaks to you, that the way colors speak to you, for instance, right? And to round all of this off is to say that when you profess your vision of an ideal society through the great gates that you make, through the madrasas that you tile, through the great miniatures that you gift leaders of other nations, when you're doing that and it symbolizes your very conception of the universe, your very conception of the way the world is ordered, it is inextricably linked with your vision of the truth of what is good, of what is beautiful.
What we are trying to say is that above any subjective, arbitrary ethics that a civilization take on themselves, be it the Romans and manliness, be it America with entrepreneurship, be it China with stability through the bureaucratic order and everything that they created, three things stand out: goodness, truth, and beauty. And this is an idea communicated by Thomas Aquinas. It's an idea communicated by Aristotle. It's an idea communicated by a lot of some of the greatest thinkers ever.
And you just don't have to listen to it because Arbaaz said it.
Yeah.
So that should be enough for you. But the midwits, they need some name dropping, so you had to drop in some names.
Here's the evidence, okay? Okay. Speaking on goodness, truth, and beauty, how do you think they're being manifest in the world today? I want Ahmed's opinion. Muhammad to pick.
I don't want to be a complete doomer about this, but nowadays it's less the beauty and more the rot of our society that is exposed by our cultural creations, right? So in Pakistan, it immediately exposes the cultural contradictions where it's like, okay, I'm gonna build a beautiful new house. They're rarely in any intellectual artistic lineage of Mughal art. Right? Which is the lineage, which is the intellectual artistic lineage of the subcontinent's Muslims, right? It never looks like that. It's a modern home.
I think it doesn't even have to look like a Mughal. It doesn't even have to be tied to this collectivist idea of what our cultural legacy is. I think the fact that people outsource most of the stuff to interior designers said a lot about the fact that they have no personal taste and they have no conception of beauty altogether, and so they outsource it to somebody who perhaps does.
Which is why every single house has, if anyone's even remotely into art, or even not, if you're trying to build a nice house, if you're a rich guy in Pakistan, we know you're gonna have a Mashkoor Raza in your house. Okay? We know you're gonna, if you're slightly more sophisticated, right? We know you're going to have a Tasadduq Suhail. Which is not to say that any of these artists are bad. They're all brilliant in their own way.
Absolutely,
right? I really love some of their work. Right? Reach that level of stardom where they're now commercial. Right?
The commodification of their work.
People have commodified it despite the fact that it is also beautiful.
Exactly. So now that we've established that, we haven't established a point of Plato, Aristotle, we've established, but good, truth, and beauty are foundational virtues, What are
and
your
they're
thoughts?
inexplicably linked.
They're inexplicably linked. What are your thoughts on them? How do you see goodness, truth, and beauty manifesting themselves in the contemporary world? Let's start with good.
This is a bit of a mainstream answer, but it isn't always going to be, look, what is the established order saying? What is this the extreme center where all the intellectual institutes, the lobbyists, the universities, where all of them lie, right? Who ultimately not only undergird and form the skeleton of your global order and your social order, and then tell you what to think through a billion different tentacles that they have in every aspect of your life. When they acculture you, when they ingrain you with certain values, you see that played out in your daily life. You also see that played out in the way you create and put any sort of output into the world.
You think good? What do you think? What do you think about good?
Good will always be alive in the world. Objective good will always be there, but it is increasingly further and further from the institutional good and the institutional truth. Right?
I can agree.
I see it like running away from it in real time. Right?
I can agree with you.
You've got
to
the
some degree, yeah.
you've got the very ordered, very formalized centers of truth. These ministries of truth, whether they're state, corporate, religious bureaucracies, whatever. Right? This is kind of. I mean, people are going to say that it's kind of always been like this, and I don't necessarily disagree with that. But I've only been alive
But it's
now.
really ugly.
I've only seen
But it's
it
really
now.
ugly now, and we have kind of evidence that in the past, at least, it was prettier.
It's uglier now because in an age
Like
where
literally aesthetically uglier.
it is literally aesthetically uglier, but it's uglier now on a spiritual level because you're told that democracy has arrived. You're told that you know your rights. You know, like when people are in a TV show where people have read their Miranda rights, before being arrested. I'm like, dude, it is like such deep irony that you're allowed to vote, you're allowed to worship, and you're allowed to do all of these things, and yet we seem to be straying further from the truth every single day. Further than we, that meme which is like every day we stray further from God. Like, that's kind of how I see it.
I get what you mean.
Yeah.
I think on a collective level, on a social level, there are people who can argue that hey, look, we have made some improvements input in the world. We have made some. I mean, science, the progress that we made in science and technology will stand to reason that hey, we have more truth in the world today than we had in the past, and those are valid points. I totally acknowledge them, and the way I conceive a notion of good and truth are more individual than, let's say, collective. And what I mean by that is that when I think about good, is good alive in the world? I think about, man, in my heart, I mean, of course, you have sociopaths and psychopaths and stuff out there, but in my heart, do I want to play with the cute doll? Do I want to give my mom a hug? Do I want to, help out people I care about? I do. And I think the vast, vast majority of people have that in their hearts as well, And I feel like as long as that thing is there, and I think it will always be there until the end of time, good will fundamentally be alive. Because it lives on in our hearts. I think with truth, it's like slightly murkier because truth is truth isn't just a total internalization. Truth has a lot to do with other people. Truth is like can we both agree on something, and if we both agree on it, it can be true.
For us, it's true.
For us, it's true. Truth has a social element, more of a social element to it.
Not always, but in a lot of cases,
in a lot of
cases where it would be seriously contended with, it has social element.
Of course, people have their individual truth, their individual calling, their individual thing that makes sense to them.
Living out my personal truth.
Living out your personal truth. That would always be there. But I think there is an element, there's a greater element of collectivity to truth.
The natural response to this that a lot of people say on the communist side would have is to say that yes, it is these little comforts, these material and personal trinkets of affection. They feel really great. You feel like a better person after doing them. But they're also exactly the things that are being weaponized by the powers that be to disengage you from larger political and social struggle for the emancipation of everyone. What would you have to say to that?
Man, I can see the reason. I've read a lot of the dissident literature. So I do see the reason behind it. I think a personal conclusion that I've come to is that I tend to not look for such metaphysical answers in the political, in the collective. This is my own personal thing that I've actually come to, a conclusion I've come to recently. I think that, that's what I think about it. I don't look for metaphysical answers, existential answers in collective narratives.
So when you're really deeping it, you're deeping it about your own life and your immediate surroundings as opposed to the collective.
Yeah.
I'm talking about
on a first principle basis, yes, that's what I do. I see what's happening in the world, and by understanding myself, maybe I try to come to terms with what are these people thinking, what are their psychological motivations behind why they are following certain, ideas and stuff. So it's not to say that the dissident literature or the dissident, counterculture, I'm fully like, we talk about this all the time in our free time as well. I'm fully in tune with it, and I agree with a lot of the principles. A lot of the principles make sense, but I think for the sake of not being made a useful idiot to narrative and powers that are way beyond my scope of consciousness, I try to individualize. Do you get what I mean?
Yeah. No.
And coming back to it, I think, yeah, okay, they might weaponize good and truth against us. In our hearts and stuff, we know what we like. We want to do good in the world. I do believe this. And I do believe that in our heart, we can recognize what's truth and what's not true. Cope. Cope is the ultimate
So,
example.
Cope is-
it's like, why is Cope such a meme? It's because it's like you're lying to yourself.
Yeah.
That is the negation of truth.
The guy's driving a Porsche. I would never spend that much money on a car.
Yeah.
It's like
you look at something that you like, maybe it's something that you want, and your base instinct about it is to demonize it or villainize it.
or
But
convince
that's
yourself
okay.
that's
Or convince
genuinely
yourself-
immoral.
Convince you that it's immoral, convince yourself that you're above such material or such, frivolous things.
But when
But I-
given the chance, you would most likely
Yeah.
jump for it.
So push comes to shove, a lot of people cope. And I think the fact that we recognize it as cope says a lot about our abilities to recognize what's true and what's not. Because because we come to the conclusion that it's cope, on some level, truth exists in our mind. We're like, okay, that's a lie. You know what I mean? So I think goodness and truth conceptually, it's very, very tough to kill these ideas because there's such a personal dimension to them. There's such a it's inside my own head. And I can say one thing and I can be thinking the entire exact opposite thing. So I think it's very difficult to rid the world of these two concepts.
The intellectual response to that would be something like, yes, you live your life every day in your microcosm to your personal satisfaction. You hug your dog, you give your mom a hug, you help out someone in your immediate periphery who's in need.
Yeah.
Right?
Be honest to yourself.
Be honest to yourself. Yet there are great systemic issues
Mm-hmm.
which, as a person of means, as a person now with a platform, with a legion of burgers behind them,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Vanguard.
With a vanguard of burgers.
Not
behind
just
them.
Vanguard, you got Chad and Performative.
We got chats and performative meals after this podcast with us too. Because you guys are so easy to bait, right?
Hopefully, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So after that, you've got this coalition of the willing behind you.
Yeah.
Now, do you or do you not have some sort of personal responsibility to enact change, as the performative males like to say, right? As the religious Instagram story posters like to say, or is this it? Is this what you're doing enough?
See, it depends on how you're defining what we should do about it. Yeah. If you're defining
Okay,
it,
Jordan Peterson.
huh?
Okay, Jordan Peterson.
I think how I see is the best we can do about something like this, and this comes back to my apolitical kind of sensibilities. That I think that the only way you can do something about it is through your own brain. If everything on the individual basis can do it, I think we can solve some of this problem. I don't believe in political action or something like this.
So I can meet you halfway there, where I think political action is absolutely necessary, but it cannot happen without the enlightenment of the self first.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah. I would tend to agree with you.
So that resource gathering phase of your life,
yeah.
this goes for the performative males and for the chuds.
Yeah.
The resource gathering phase is
You can't put the
essential.
cart before the horse.
Absolutely.
The political action or the policy level changes that you want to make on this need to be secondary to your own pursuits of goodness, truth, and beauty. But you need to pursue these three things first before you can.
Very interesting segues come to mind.
Yeah.
One is, like, for example, right? There are several contexts. There's a Pakistani context. There's also a communist context to where interest-based lending and a usury-based system is vehemently rejected, whether it's for religious reasons, whether it's for social reasons, whatever.
Yeah.
Right. One of the solutions put forward to that is that if you're a conscientious objector to a system that you're forced to live within, how do you handle that? on a just an ontological level, on a deeply personal myself as a moral being level, how do you reconcile that with the life you live every day, dealing with those institutions, right? The answer that has been posited by some very intelligent people that I kind of tend to agree with is that you're in that resource gathering phase, you're living your life well,
Yeah.
and on a personal level, you don't engage in worsening that thing,
Yeah.
right? I think that's a very reasonable answer.
Yeah.
So you're not living in that internal moral self denial.
Mhm.
You're not letting that terrible, gnawing contradiction build up inside you, right? And you feel like you're doing something as well. It kind of calms the conscience.
That's a good way of approaching it. I don't see any harm in it. Maybe it doesn't work for some people, but I think it's fair. I think I would approach the same way. So coming to like some sort of reconciliation on the topic of good and truth. I think what I have to ultimately say about it, I think good and truth are alive and they will always be alive, no matter what power structure, institution tries weaponizing or conceptions of these against us. I think you can't kill this idea. I don't think you can kill these things from people's heart. These will always be virtues. And you?
I agree. I think the question that follows is private rebellion versus public rebellion,
Okay.
right? How much of it is an ontological resistance, right? And I'll be very specific what I mean by that. Like, so, the concept of ontological freedom, if I explain it in the most layman way possible, is in, say you're imprisoned.
Yeah.
You are literally in shackles.
Yeah.
But ontologically, you are always free.
Mm-hmm.
You can be an objector to your situation. You can will and try to do different.
Yeah.
Right? So very basic explanation, but to be an ontological, conscientious objector to a moral ill being carried out around you, does that have any value? I actually think it does.
Yeah.
Right? It has first and foremost value in the sense that it simmers inside you until it comes to a head, and then you might emerge into a public sort of engagement with the powers that be and try to change things.
Okay.
Right? But on a level, say, where you're just an ascetic, right?
Okay.
You're a private person.
Yeah.
Does that moral, on a completely intellectual level, doesn't matter? I think even there it has value.
Okay.
Right? And in terms of freeing yourself, how you think it has value. And then in a secondary way, in the generations that come after you, and you pass that on to them. And then perhaps you were the progenitor of an idea, of an ethos in your family, in your immediate community, that maybe in an ugly time did not, could not, and maybe it wasn't wise to at that point speak truth to power, but there was a time 10 years from now, 20 years from now, where it cultivated in something consequential. So that I think it has back.
Makes sense. I follow it. So to sum it up, I'm the hermit and you are noise. That's the way we think. And I don't think that's too.
Maybe.
I don't think that's too.
There's no thing
given
either.
our own like subjective understanding of this
Yeah.
thing. I am more of a hermit than you, and you are more of a activist than I am. So
Damn, bro. I never want to be described as an activist. To the
And I don't want
connotations attached to it today, but
I describe myself as a hermit, so it's like suck it up.
yeah. Okay, no, fair enough.
You know.
Fair enough.
Okay,
Yeah.
so coming back to the third virtue, which is duty. Now, I am not an blue pill when it comes to duty. Duty scares the shit out of it, especially the state of duty and the virtue. I think that as mass population, we have even on a national level, on a societal level, we have lost the ability to create good art, to recognize what is beautiful, and we have lost the ability to even let other people create it in a lot of different ways, you know? So I am an absolute doomer when it comes to the state of beauty in the world today. And I think that's the main crux of what we're trying to talk about today. You know? Well, what are your thoughts? Just prior to getting into it, what are your thoughts?
First and foremost, that beauty is the child of our moral precepts. So you look at good and you look at truth and you get them in a room together and you get what our conceptions of beauty are.
Yeah.
Right? And obviously, it's not endlessly subjective. We react to colors, we react to form, we react to symmetry. All of those things are true. So our conception of beauty is underpinned by those, and arguably that mirrors good and truth, because in a biodeterministic way, there's only a certain limit to which humans will also determine their good and their truth, right?
Yeah.
There's a reason that every society may oscillate between sexual decadence and modesty, but those are always consistent themes that a human society tries to moderate.
Yeah.
Right? So there are underpinnings in the moral world. There's also underpinnings in what is beautiful.
Yeah.
Right? And in the last couple of 100 years, where you see the emergence of brutalist architecture, you see the emergence of Bauhaus.
Yeah.
Right? You see a lot of commentators in the cultural
rap
music. Rap music.
You're a fan.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Okay.
But you see cultural commentators in the West say that, talk about the death of beauty and say you have these massive gray structures. The only competition is mine's 30 stories, yours is 40. There's this needle-like.
Mine cheaper than yours.
My materials were bioengineered. Were yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, my cement is eco-friendly. Was yours?
Yeah.
It's stuff like that. I made this needle like Burj Khalifa. Okay? And now the next guy, the next trillionaire sovereign wealth fund is trying to make a needle that's even thinner and even taller.
Yeah.
There is an ingenuity there.
Yeah.
There's a marvel of human engineering there.
Yeah.
Right? For sure. But when the Western lens, the modern Western lens that's critiquing this gray art, this gray substitute for beauty.
Yeah.
Right? The question there is, are they simply hearkening back to their classical beauty and saying it doesn't fit into our conceptions of that? Because even if we compare it to, say, great Mughal art, great Islamic art, right? The modern gray structure does not fit into that canon, that conception of beauty.
It doesn't have to. I think any modern art, modern or futuristic, it's very difficult for it to be totally divorced from architectural or artistic legacy, but it doesn't have to just define itself as the carrier of that. Like,
it has form,
yeah,
it has symmetry, it has a lot of these characteristics
yeah,
that have all, for example, when people come and say that, oh, there's this dot on a canvas, why did it sell for $40 million? I have some sympathy with that argument, right? But say at my uni, the robots library, for instance,
yeah,
right? I don't necessarily find it compelling the same way I would find like the Sistine Chapel or Sadiq Ain's mural in Fair Hall. But there's a grandeur to it.
Yeah.
There's something immediate that you grasp and you're like, how did people make this?
Yeah.
Right? So that aspect is definitely there. And when you link it to the goodness and the truth, and this has been kind of beaten to death endlessly, but we have to mention in the context of our conversation, that it is no surprise in a postmodern world, in a post-truth, in a post-objective morality world, you have these sorts of deviant art forms emerging and taking on a civilizational splendor.
Yeah.
I've got no beef with the Burj Khalifa, right?
Yeah.
Marvel of human achievement.
Yeah, I love the Burj Khalifa.
Incredible.
Yeah.
Right?
Especially at night time when it's like shining and stuff. I think it looks absolutely stunning.
Look at Billionaires Row in New York. Right?
Yeah.
Same stuff, incredible engineering, buildings that are like stick thin and 100 stories tall. But therein lies the problem, which is, why do all of them look the same?
Yeah.
Right? You have been essentially stripped of your identity and put in the ideological, visual, aesthetic hands of, like, I don't know, some German engineers from like the early 20th century. And I don't know if that's the aesthetic future that we want for ourselves.
Yeah. Like, let's take a practical example like skylines, I mean, most big major city skylines look kind of similar. There's kind of a similar theme going on. You've got like glass, steel, concrete, straight line, a bunch of lights, as opposed to like, back in the day where a skyline, or they weren't skylines back then, but kind of like, the monument for the Colosseum is very different to the Taj Mahal. You know what I mean? And that's very different to the Trevi Fountain. And that's very different to the Great Wall of China. All these things have like unique personalities about them. So it's not to say that modern, like, steel and glass buildings are bad in of themselves. It's just saying that there's a monotony to every major city's skyline or postcard pretty much being the same.
And it's natural for a profit motivated corporation to say that I want to build with the most efficient materials.
Uh-huh.
I want to build the fastest, most economic version of
Uh-huh.
a building.
Yeah.
Right? And that is in part the motivation that leads to create things like this.
Yeah.
Right? That's fine.
I mean, I understand.
That's understandable.
Yeah.
That's understandable.
You're
But
optimizing for economic output, for cost cutting, and in those circumstances,
GDP maxing.
GDP maxing, we'll get it GDP maxing in a minute, but you're placing the economic viability as the premier factor, so it makes sense to do this.
So who fixes this?
Yeah.
You've got a nanny state with its hands full.
Mm-hmm.
You've got naturally profit motivated corporations.
Yeah.
And you've got a civil society that doesn't necessarily have the resources to reform the cultural rot that we're in. So who fixes it?
Trying to answer who fixes it, now first we need to identify what is assaulting beauty in the first place. And I don't want to get into specific groups or states or tangible phenomena to answer this because it's a can of worms. I think what's more important to recognize are those ideological phenomena, those accepted truths that we look at that are leading the assault on beauty. And when I think about it, I mean, I wrote about it. The two things that come to my mind are the concepts of GDP maxing and the concept of artistic democratization. So these, in my opinion, lead the assault on beauty.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's get into GDP maxing first.
Yeah.
Right? So from what I understand,
Yeah.
GDP maxing is obviously no one is alien to the general criticism on the metric that is GDP.
Yeah.
That this is a one-dimensional representation of economic output.
Yeah.
Right? Even at that, it's kind of inefficient. But I don't want to go all finance, bro.
Yeah.
That's not the place to do that.
Yeah.
But we look at it more as a mind state, where yes, when you teach your child that you want to be a success in this life, you say nothing.
The dollars.
It's pesa.
Okay.
Right? Yeah.
That's fine. Yeah.
So that's where GDP maxing comes in. Artistic democratization is back in the day until very recently, for most of human history, you had a elite circle jerk or the state patronizing the majority of your artists, and they were catered then towards those elite refined tastes.
Yeah.
You might get a lot of hate for saying that.
Yeah.
But that's where throughout human history, that's where most of the beauty has come from.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, so let's get deep into GDP maxing first. So GDP maxing is the idea that you must primarily measure a phenomenon based upon its economic utility and economic output at the expense of other factors, sometimes without consideration of the other factors at all. So, like yesterday, carbon credits, the financialization of carbon credit as as an instrument. This is like peak GDP maxing behavior. It's like, we see this problem, we're destroying rivers. Can we put a price upon destroying the rivers? Yes, we can. Okay, let's trade this. It's a financial, let's trade this as an instrument. Yeah, I destroyed 10 rivers. I'm going to buy 10 carbon credits. And you know what?
It doesn't even stop like this.
And I know a bunch of economic bros are going to murder me for what I think, but this is kind of what...
You could have some, you could save face by saying that, we're actually making the environment cleaner by creating these credits, and then you're like, okay, now you've made an exchange for them.
Yeah.
There's carbon derivatives. Okay, it doesn't stop, right?
Yeah. It's like peak GDP maxing thinking. It's like, hey, listen, can we put a price on things? Can we measure everything by the economic utility and economic output without keeping other factors?
It's also like growth addiction, right?
Growth addiction.
It's growth addiction, which is basically a byword for the GDP maxing.
Yeah.
And even just the idea that even when you're engaged in purely economic activity, it is growth oriented as opposed to consolidative or quality oriented.
Yeah.
That's what overall the quality cutting.
Yeah. I think that GDP maxing is inherently it's so small brain, it's so limited in its scope to analyze something. It's because GDP maxers miss out so much of the picture in the artistically utilitarian pursuit of a few extra bucks to the net margin. Let's take the West as a great example for this. The West, which is like, leading this ideological frontier of GDP maxing. Maybe they're not, maybe other countries are, but like, it's just great to use them as an example. Okay. So GDP maxer would think of it like, we must make cheaper buildings because it saves us more money. Simple. What GDP Maxer doesn't understand is that all your conceptualizations of what is giving you economic output today stem from, let's say, the Industrial Revolution. The Industrial Revolution is not possible without the scientific method and the Enlightenment. So there's a clear ideological basis to what eventually became GDP maxing. The Enlightenment gave us the scientific method. The Enlightenment gave us the ability to, not gave us the ability to be rational, but it really, really codified and venerated rationalization, logic, A plus B equals to AB type thinking. You get what I mean? So there's the Enlightenment.
And like, we're not under the impression that our critique of GDP or then okay now we've got HDI or this is nothing unique, but what we're reminding people and which I think what you said right now is the key to this is that yes, on 100-year scale people operate on economics, people operate on finance, but on a millennia scale the things that make those movements possible are all ideological, they're all artistic, they're all linked to some higher moral truths.
Exactly.
So for example, yes, today you're like, okay, I'm looking at like what's happening in South America and I'm looking at a political situation. I'm looking at the reforms that Javier Milei is making in this country. Are any of those reforms happening without the championing of those libertarian-esque values in the West? Are those happening further back without Henry David Thoreau's insertion of that kind of thinking into the American popular imagination? Is that happening without the Enlightenment? All of these things are deeply, deeply linked to each other.
Yeah.
So on
you can't divorce basically the economic output from the ideology itself.
And the civilizational
Enlightenment.
On a civilizational time scale, these are the most important things. Right? On a civilizational time scale, that financialization of everything was also caused by changes made 100, 200, 500 years ago. Right?
The ideas, the scientific method.
And where does art come into all of that?
And where does art come into all of this?
We've talked about the moral precepts, where we're saying the ideology, those are the moral precepts. Right?
And where does beauty come into it? Where does art come into this? The Enlightenment does not happen without the Renaissance. It absolutely doesn't. And what was Renaissance? The Renaissance. The Renaissance was an explicitly artistic movement. The Renaissance is where we got Da Vinci, the Vitruvian Man, the Golden Ratio. It had a clear idea of what humanistic beauty was. It was a celebration of that humanist form, that beauty. It was the painting of the Sistine Chapel. It was all these artistic creation. It was the creation of all of this beauty that led to the Enlightenment, which then led to the scientific method, which then led to the Industrial Revolution, which then led to the GDP maxing type behavior that we have today. And if you want to reconcile all of it, the conclusion you come to is that the GDP maxing behavior is divorced from all of the stuff that made it possible in the first.
So you see the kind of contradiction here, where it's like, okay, the Enlightenment births the ideals that eventually degenerate, in my opinion, into hyper-individualism. Right? Which also harms art. We'll get into that later. But it births hyper-individualism on a 300-400 year time scale, right? And then what we're talking about, which and that's what leads to GDP maxing, in my opinion, because if you're thinking on a civilizational time scale, on an intergenerational time scale, a lot of these things are solved. So there's a inherent irony
tension.
There's
a dialectic.
Yeah,
no, absolutely there is. And so I think to sum it up, it's that you cannot divorce the economic output to the GDP maximum. You cannot divorce economic output of a society from its artistic, and its ideological foundations. I think without ideological and artistic foundations, like economics are the second level.
So, I mean, in Pakistan, you look at it, it's like a immediate,
Yeah.
where our architecture is confused.
Yeah.
You see like a house anywhere in defense,
Yeah.
right? You've got like these modern aesthetics on the one hand, but it also looks like quintessentially DC. Like you couldn't look at that house and tell that it's not Pakistan. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
All of our cultural output is confused. You can see that in our television. You can see that in our art.
Yeah.
And this isn't necessarily to say you completely abandon all Western influence.
Absolutely.
It's the soft power of the world. You
Absolutely.
take the good, you leave the bad,
Take the good.
as with
Yeah,
everything
yeah,
else,
always.
right? This the same Sir Sayyid Ahmed Khan type logic, right? You take the good, leave the bad. Allama Iqbal type logic. You take the good, you leave the bad. I think that's the happy middle when it comes to approaching this kind of stuff. But some sense of some stream of revivalism is also, in my opinion, necessary, if only to take it forward.
Yeah, I mean you can't afford the luxury of taking the good and leaving the bad when you don't have something in the
But you don't have the good.
Yeah, no, when you don't have something of yourself for the first place. Okay, I've got something for myself, so I'll take the good from you, and I'll leave out the bad. This is a luxury only afforded to those who have something in the first place. I think we have stuff. It's just that we don't care about it. It's just not in the Overton window of the mainstream dialogue enough for us to care about.
And like to be clear, and we've got phenomenal Pakistani artists.
Yeah, it's not.
That's not what we're saying,
Not
right?
at all.
Who draw on Western influences, who make fantastic Mughal miniatures.
Yeah,
All of that's there.
yeah,
But on a truly societal scale, you've got these paintings in homes, in galleries, and places that aren't accessible to everyone.
yeah.
You think about it this way. Do you think that tomorrow, I remember this one incident years ago when this guy tried to go into Cafe Flow, he was on a bike and they didn't let him in.
I've heard of this.
Yeah, it happened years ago.
Yeah.
Do you think if someone went on a bike to some elite art gallery, or someone went who wasn't a well-off looking person,
Yeah.
wouldn't fit in the conventional idea of upper class Pakistani, tried to go into an art gallery, they would treat him the same way if they let him in at all,
Yeah.
right? My point going there isn't some wishy-washy emotional class commentary, although that is tragic.
Yeah.
It is to say that these incredible works of art that some people in Pakistan are clearly capable of should not be sequestered inside our homes. They should not be captive to a few private eyes.
That they shouldn't, but in order for them to not be so, they need to be more of an ecosystem. Like you said earlier, it's not that we don't have good artists and good creative. We do have them. But per capita, compared to a more artistically inclined society, it is very, very small. We can't not count that.
No, absolutely. And I'm not even saying that rip these paintings out of people's homes and put them up in public.
No.
I'm saying, like you said, when we have an ecosystem, we will have good private art and we will have good public art.
We will have good public art, we will have good private art, and we'll have a greater rate at which we are creating this
Absolutely.
stuff. You know what I mean? It's that there's no ecosystem to start off.
And then, even when we were talking about earlier, in order to have iteration, in order to have experimentation, in order to have subcultures, you need a main culture.
Yeah.
Right? You iterate away from the main culture, and that's how you achieve unique things.
Yeah.
If your main art market is very small relative to any of our neighbors, right? You're not going to have people willing to take risks.
Yes.
Right? Because fortunately or unfortunately, there's a monetary element to this.
No.
And there has to be a certain saturation in the core of the art world for it then to spill over to the periphery.
I guess.
So experimentation is not happening until you've got a bigger market.
Yes. And all of this is going to sound so counterintuitive when we talk about the second group that is leading the assault on art, in my eyes at least. It is the artistic Democrats.
Yeah.
And what I mean by the artistic Democrat,
बेटा तुम math नहीं कर सकते, You can't be a lawyer either. You know what? I'm sending you to Indus Valley. I'm sending you to NCA.
Yeah, I guess so.
Not because you're artistically brilliant, but because you're good at nothing else.
Yeah. I mean, I get where you're coming from, but that's not what I mean when I'm
What do you mean?
artistic Democrat. What I'm saying by artistic Democrats, right? It's this persistent push, this persistent whispering in the ears of the masses and people that, art and beauty should be inclusive. Art should be inclusive. It should be for everyone. I don't have a problem with art that is for everyone, Pop music can be great. A lot of popular forms of whatever can be great. I don't have a problem with this stuff. But the problem lies in when you try to establish inclusivity as a first principle. What I mean by that is that beauty is not, in essence, containing inclusivity as a first principle. It includes rhythm, harmony, balance, form, geometry, these type of, factors. Inclusivity doesn't exist in that. Why I have so much of a problem with this idea that art should be inclusive, it misses the point entirely. Art can be inclusive. It is actually great if it is. It's not a bad thing. But it's not a first principle. And I think using this as such is destroying our ability to make good art.
When you say inclusive, particularly, is it across all demographics? Like, what specifically do you mean? Inclusive to who?
Inclusive to, okay, let's do a very, very practical example, okay? You go to a house party, and then you go to another house party the year after, right? Suppose it's like, hey, Momi, why don't you get on the aux? He's like, okay, sure, I'll get on the aux. You play something that maybe some people like, but they don't know. And the immediate knee-jerk reaction is, play something that all of us like.
Yeah.
It's like, I get that. There's the time and place. I'm not going to make you guys listen to heavy metal when I'm chilling with a bunch of people, But this idea that, like, hey, listen, let's just do something for everyone. That's my problem with the artistic democratization of things.
So on the democratization front, I do think that full agreement, inclusivity, whatever that vaguely even means,
should be inclusivity.
So that shouldn't be a first principle to your creative process.
Yes.
Right? If as a creator you manage to make something, a piece of music, a piece of art that also appeals to the masses, phenomenal.
Great, yeah.
Right?
Michael Jackson's great.
Yeah.
Weekend is great.
And because there is some objective basis to artistic appreciation and quality, there will obviously be things that a lot of people tend to that the mass of people will appreciate.
Yeah.
Right? And in the modern era, why I'm not completely against the democratization aspect is that, yes, you've got increased conformity, where you've literally got these producers that mathematically map out what beat, what major minor note triggers which part of your brain, releases which chemicals, and they replicate beat after beat after beat to make you want to like those things. And they dig you into this hole of musical conformity. Instance, right? Absolutely. I think that's real.
It's a homogenization.
At the same time, that's a big mass of people are listening to the same 5, 10, 15 artists.
Yes.
Right? I think that's uninspiring. At the same time, there's another angle to this in modernity, where specifically through the internet, you've got now an interface with people making niche original content who also now have direct access, algorithmically enabled access to people who are also interested in niche stuff or who can develop that taste with them. Mm-hmm. So when I look at that, I look at artists on Instagram who started with no formal training, who started with no gallery. They started posting their things online. They've got hundreds of thousands, millions of followers.
Yeah.
Musicians doing the same thing. There was just Vogue and Elle and like these big fashion magazines. You've got now these small publications that have iterated away that have thousands of, often millions of followers.
Yeah.
Right? So while the internet has enabled a lot of slop as well,
yeah,
in my opinion, it has also enabled a lot of original creative content that would never have come to the surface otherwise.
So I don't disagree with what you're saying about the internet, like, creating a platform for a bunch of, really creative, unique people to come up with ideas and, like, make some really good art. I'm not disagreeing with that. What I do think is that for the person, and I don't know how exactly related this is to artistic democratization. Maybe it's a different concept altogether. But because we speak about the algorithm showing people, hey, I think you might like this, right? It takes away from the effort that one needs to make in order to find stuff that they like. Suppose I'm into some really niche stuff and the algorithm knows it. So the algorithm feeds me back niche stuff. It kind of puts a blinder, a firewall in my ability to go find something else. Because the algorithm knows the niche I like, it knows what I like, and it is going to keep feeding me that type of stuff. And I think this creates like a bit of a cycle where, niche creators, niche people, yeah, some of them make some great stuff, but some of them make some fucking flop as well. But they know that their flop is going to be viable in the art market because the algorithm is going to push it to people who somewhat kind of like it. They're going to be lukewarm. Hey, this is not bad, but I don't mind it playing in the background. You get what I mean? Now, if you compare the modern way of finding good art, in this case, we talk about music, to the algorithm, to what maybe our boomer predecessor had to do, where they had to go to a record shop, they had to look through a catalog of records and be like, okay, which one do I like? I like the album art of this kind of, this is kind of cool. It's got red, it's got skulls, it's kind of badass. You know what I mean?
The girls will like you by listening to this.
Yeah, man, maybe a girl looks at it, it's got pink, it's got roses, it's got, some lipstick. Maybe I like this. What I mean to say is that it was a crapshoot back then.
Yeah.
I walk into a record store, I like the look of a certain thing, and I buy it. Maybe I heard through a friend of a friend that, hey, David Bowie is a really good artist, and I give it a shot. There's a lot of personal agency involved, and maybe I'm romanticizing the past, but there's something kind of beautiful in that of me walking into a record store and, do you know what? Russian roulette. This looks nice to me. I'm gonna take this. I'm gonna listen to it. Hey, homie, why don't you buy this? We'll swap out after a week. It takes effort to do that.
I've lived this.
And the payoff for something like this, I'm sure, is much greater than, just the algorithm being like, hey, I think you might like this. So while I do agree with you that the internet makes it possible for small creators to reach more audiences, I feel like it also takes away a lot of agency and ability to find genuinely new things and expand the taste on the part of the audience.
Okay, here's how I anecdotally balance this. Because when you describe this, it's like brought back childhood flashbacks where I never had a literary guide. I discovered books completely on my own. And it was iterative in the same way you described, going into the record store.
Yeah.
I'd be like, I can remember times when I just want that book because the cover is nice.
So nice.
Right? As a kid, that was, yeah. And then obviously the process of discovery also got refined as I got older.
Yeah.
Right? And then I used to feel quite validated when I later in my late teens or even early 20s maybe started engaging more in the online literary world and saw what was prized, what was not. Right? And I was like, actually, this validates me because it made me think that I had a pretty good eye back then.
Yeah.
Because I identified some really good literature without having a literary guide.
Yeah.
Right? It's very rewarding. At the same time, I looked at most people now, like, when someone tells me nowadays that they read, I'm like, man, A Thousand Splendid Suns doesn't count. The Da Vinci Code doesn't count. Okay? Mm-hmm. Yeah, you go to like, you look at Obama's recommended list and you read, if that's what you read, then, bro, like, you don't read that. You don't read, right? That
peak artistic democratization.
Peak democratization, peak midwittery. And I look at that and I'm like, yes, you needed a process of discovery.
Yeah.
At the same time, when I look at the niche creators online who are doing some incredible things, if they can build a platform where they've got 20,000, 30,000, 40,000 people watching them,
Good for
where they've got 100 people on their Patreon, right? What we would end up with, everyone knows some uncle who was in a band in the 70s. Then he was forced to work a corporate job or go into the
Yeah.
family business or something. Now, he's a washed up aspiring artist.
Yeah.
I think we may end up in a world with a lot less of those people. Because if you make, even through a small supportive community, if you make that process of unique iteration of different art financially viable, you can have those people support themselves to some extent.
Okay.
And I think that you can have that world while fighting the slot machine.
Okay. See what you say.
Yeah.
The modern platform gives the ability for small people who might not be that great or might not, I mean, great is very subjective, but it gives everyone an audience. I recognize that.
And dissident art. Because dissident art, at least in the past few decades or maybe ever, was not possible the way it is today. Because
Fundamentally disagree, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, really?
Fundamentally disagree.
So, you always had dissident art, I think, is more of a phenomenon of the past 100, 200 years. So it existed then, but maybe not as much throughout history. But I think it's turbocharged now in the sense that you can distribute easier. You can literally, if you're that hounded
But
down.
financial viability will always rely upon software message today. And now, like, coming back to you talking about Boomer Uncle who used to be a band, now was corporate job. Yes, the competition back then used to be a lot more intense because the barrier to entry to be a good artist in, let's say, the 70s, early 80s, or the 60s was, can you play an instrument? It takes over to 10, 20,000 hours to be good enough at an instrument to make your own, guitar lesson and whatnot. The barrier to entry was there. Back then, there was a certain degree of technical excellence you needed to be, a musician. That's not today, especially with mixing software. You pick sample. Like most music these days is just a sample of a sample. We saw the 80s revival in current music. I mean, I love The Weeknd and I like Dua Lipa as well, but they kind of lead the charge of this, it's an old Elton John beat or song that's been repackaged, it doesn't have anything new to say. It's good music, it's fun to listen to, but it doesn't have anything new to say. Back then, because we didn't have an algorithmically determined solution as to, hey, this will be good, this will be bad, this will sell, this will not. You had a lot more experimental stuff coming out. I don't think it's possible in today's environment, and this is to your point about dissident music or dissident art. I don't think it's really, really possible for something as organic as a Nirvana to happen in today's musical sphere. Nirvana was, rock music was the king of music in from the 60s to the mid 90s or something. But late 80s, early 90s, that's the time frame we're talking about. Nirvana took all of the excesses of heavy metal, sex, drugs, rock and roll, twisted them on its head. I don't think something like that.
Mainstream them.
And mainstream them. Nirvana.
But then is it by definition dissident art?
It is absolutely no. They didn't try to mainstream it. Their goal was not to mainstream it. It just got on like wildfire.
But if the principal discussion we're having is whether dissident art,
is extremely dissident. So they had a song called Rape Me. At that time, if you make a song called Rape Me today, it's a problem. Bro, they did that in the 90s and they absolutely dominated.
Sure. Again, but coming back to the principle, the principal conversation we're having is dissident art possible once Nirvana was no longer dissident art and it was popular music?
Nirvana, the lead singer killed himself within 4 years of their debut album.
Sure, but my question,
so they never really went pop.
I mean, they're incredibly popular. They're one of the best-selling bands ever.
Bro,
that's by my definition mainstream.
That is mainstream, but the entire contradiction that is Kurt Cobain is that they made the album Nevermind, that they wanted this, Kurt Cobain was like, man, I just want this to be a small underground thing. I want to do gigs in Seattle. It blew the fuck up and he couldn't handle it. It really, really tortured him. He's like, because this isn't because so many people like it, it's so popular, it's not real. So in their follow-up album, In Utero, they went they went way, way raw with the project. They're like, we want to strip away everything that made Nevermind popular.
So the question.
Let's rough it up. Let's make it offensive as hell. Let's turn the pop heads off.
The question
that
again.
was the thought process.
The question
They're
again.
true artists, man. That's dissidence. That's real dissidence.
But then it's popular. The question that
I don't have a problem with
But let me
popular.
ask the question.
I don't have a
I've been trying to ask questions.
problem with
Let me
popular.
ask questions.
Yeah.
Let me ask questions. And I keep coming back to this.
Yeah.
Is the contention then that in the 70s things
Talking to the 90s right now.
to the 90s?
Yeah.
Okay, take before the internet age.
Yeah.
Right? To simplify. That experimental things could break through into the mainstream easier. That is your opinion. Yes?
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. But when you talk about dissident art, right? Dissident art, I think by its definitionally not dissident anymore once it has been mainstreamed.
No, I disagree.
Okay, you can disagree with that, but then the question becomes...
Is Nick Fuentes mainstream today? I have a question. Is he mainstream today?
Nick Fuentes?
Yeah, is he mainstream today? I think
he is breaking the barrier. He's breaking the barrier.
No,
he's breaking the barrier.
He's not breaking the barrier because you have plenty of examples of dissident stuff that breaks into the mainstream. Dissident and popular are not
okay. Let me ask you this
to each other.
right?
I am saying that in the field of music,
I'm really glad
it's
you
not
brought this up.
possible for dissident.
If you let me speak.
Yeah, sure.
The Nick Fuentes is the perfect example which completely flattens your argument, because how would have a Nick Fuentes network been viable in the pre-internet age? Explain that.
It would have been, of course.
How? What medium? How would you know the person exists? Because a radio network would never let him on, right? A major.
So you think that we didn't have like rebels in the past?
That's not what I'm saying.
No, but that's what dissidence is, right?
No,
Dissidence is
yeah.
basically a synonym for rebellion. Did we not have rebellion
Absolutely.
in the past?
Of course we did. My argument is not that. My
So then
argument
what's your argument?
My argument is very simple.
Yeah.
My argument is that in the internet age,
Yeah.
where you've got a direct interface between weirdos,
Yeah.
right? Fringeoids,
Yeah.
right? Random people in the fringe of society making whatever they want,
Yeah.
right? Who can have now an interface to connect with others that can financially, or at least even just in terms of views, support them and access their art. The support structure that now exists in the internet age for them did not exist before. Popular crossover appeal, I agree with you.
I disagree with what you just said.
So
I think
the Nick Fuentes question.
Okay, the answer I'll answer it very, very simply. Yes, it's possible for Nick Fuentes to reach a bigger audience faster and in their lifetime today. But if you want to talk about fringe dissident figures of the yesteryear, let's take Friedrich Nietzsche for example. Friedrich Nietzsche had no success. He died broke, like of syphilis and something. Friedrich Nietzsche, on the other hand, did break into like the required reading list of what would become the Nazi Party at some point, did he not? The people who are looking for dissident literature, the people who are looking for dissident art will find it regardless.
Will they find it easier today in the internet age? Yes.
I don't think it's necessarily a good thing.
That's a different thing. That's a different story. Your moral judgment of that is a different story, but of course it is easier to find it.
It might be easier, but I don't see how it being easier has any moral merit.
But that's a different conversation. My contention.
No, but I don't disagree with you when you say that it can be distributed through a wider audience. Yeah, sure, it can, but does that make it any more effective? Does that make it any more profound?
The fact that your art is.
I don't think it necessarily does.
I mean, art exists by virtue. It is the object-subject exchange. Like there has to be someone to see it for it to be recognized as art.
Yes, it does. And there's plenty of examples of dissidents and rebellions of the past who, without the platform of the internet, absolutely broke through the mainstream of ideas. Socrates is the ultimate example of a dissident. He was asked to condemn his beliefs or be put to death, and he chose to be put to death. And today we still talk about Socrates. So I disagree with the notion
all these examples you're giving are the mainstream. Even Nietzsche, after his death, was mainstream through mainstream sources. Like,
okay, so
became a popular. I'm talking
okay.
about by virtue. I'm talking definitionally about people on the periphery. Obviously, they've got an ecosystem.
But people on the periphery,
the Nick example which you gave is a perfect example of that.
Yeah, he's a perfect example of the fact that the periphery, the dissident, can break into the mainstream. That's what I was arguing.
No, not
I didn't argue for anything other than
you had to be something first in order to then reach the mainstream.
Obviously.
So that's easier now.
I don't know if it's easier now. I don't know. I really don't know if it's easier now.
Do you think that I mean, I think it's obvious it's easier now because obviously back in the day when you had major record
It's
labels,
easier for slop to get into the mainstream now. Back then, only the greatest of the great could make it there.
survivorship bias.
Sure, yeah, that's fine.
Funded through a very
Modern lens, yes, okay.
No, not modern lens.
So that-
It's not modern lens. You
Be that
literally
to what?
through labels.
Through labels, yeah, sure. You're the one who said survivorship bias, and you're telling me about labels. Be that as it may, good works, good art, good literature, good music always found its way into the mainstream. Back then, pre-internet age, and it will continue to find it in the internet.
Again, that's a different
You know-
conversation.
But that's what you're talking.
No, I'm not. I made it very clear. Actually, you reminded me. I made it very clear. I said the conversation of whether something can break into the mainstream because not everything will always be mainstream.
Yeah.
And once it's mainstream, it's no longer on the periphery. I'm talking about the periphery.
Yeah.
Is it not possible, more than ever before now, for viable, sustainable, peripheral ecosystems of art to exist?
I would argue that the peripheral cannot exist anymore because, like I said, everything has been algorithmized.
So what about the artist with 30,000, 40,000, 80,000 followers on Instagram?
He's still subscribing to an entire subgenre that probably has 1 million, 2 million followers as it is. So
I mean,
it's not
everyone's art is related to
internet,
something.
the internet.
Nirvana's art or Nirvana's music also had some relation to some music. Like
Yes,
before.
for a very, very specific group of underground clubs in Seattle. We know this to be sure.
The
Why?
artists say the same thing? That we've got.
No, but
Are you saying there are no
but they're
artists
not-
with an
but-
underground aesthetic with 30,000, 20,000 followers?
But they're not geographically limited or limited in any way. There's no limitations anymore because
the new
internet-
guys.
The new.
Yeah,
the
that's a
internet,
good thing.
the internet takes away the possibility of a periphery. So your idea that a dissident periphery voice can break into the mainstream, I'd argue there's no such thing as a periphery voice anymore because nothing is geographic anymore. Nothing is local anymore.
You
Everything
don't have
is
to
international.
conceptualize a periphery as geographic. You can conceptualize it as what is popular, what do most people consume. This is the core of what's popular, and everything outside is a periphery. That's a pretty simple conceptualization, and that's what we've been arguing along. So we should keep that.
The internet has made it possible for for the turnover of the fast thing to change. The turnover is hard. The current thing changes faster than it did back then, but I don't think it's any easier, any more difficult. The only thing I know for sure.
I mean, it is
the
because
only-
there are more of them. Are there more creatives? This is a very simple question, and I think the answer is obvious. Are there more creatives in today's world that have followers, people who recognize them, fans and patrons, or were there more of them 30 years ago, 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago?
Even if there are more today, that doesn't mean they're better today, and that's kind of
I'm
the
not
point
saying
of the
they're better.
artistic. So you're arguing for is there more quantity? Yes, Ahmedullah.
No, that's not
There's more
the
quantity.
argument.
What are you
You're
arguing for?
straw banning me.
I'm not straw banning you.
I'll lay it out for you. I'll make it very simple.
Yeah,
as I have
okay.
before. It's not a quantity thing at all. The idea is obviously there are more creatives.
Yeah.
A very small number of those creatives will still be the most popular, as it
Yeah.
always has been.
Okay.
Then there are others who are on the fringes. They have
Yeah.
smaller followings. Some of them will be dog shit.
Yeah.
Some of them will be good,
Yes.
right? And for those to sustain themselves is more possible than it has ever been in the past.
Okay.
That's it. That's all I'm saying.
Fine.
I don't know what we're arguing about.
I don't know what you're.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a good thing.
Okay.
I'm arguing that I don't think it's a good thing.
Okay.
I like that. We had.
What about the burger shop?
Huh?
What about the burger shop? Aren't we dissident media?
I don't think so.
What are we then?
I don't know what we are.
Chuds or performative media?
I think a bit of both.
Okay.
I don't really care.
Okay.
So we've kind of outlined the GDP Maxers and the artistic Democrats. These two ideologies kind of have a symbiotic relationship with each other, where the sensibilities of one feed into the sensibilities of the other, and you kind of have like this, chicken lay the egg first situation.
And it's no coincidence that the Democrats who are consuming most of the slop are also contributing most to the GDP. It's like perfect.
The GDP Maxers are like, hey, this is popular, let's make it.
Yeah.
The artistic Democrats
Or like, let
hey,
people enjoy
can we-
things, bro.
Yeah, can we let people enjoy things?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's just make the lowest common denominator. It makes the GDP Maxers' job easier, and it just feeds into each other.
Yeah.
Okay. So we've kind of outlined the two biggest attacks, how they relate to each other. Two ideas that we kind of touched on a little bit earlier, and even in the article, is private beauty and public beauty. Okay, so private beauty or private art is simply this concept of like art that's meant for subjective consumption, art that's meant for subjective enjoyment, like film, music, literature. There's some degree of a barrier to entry to this type of art, in the sense that there might be intellectual barrier when it comes to some literature. There might be a taste barrier where I might not like something, but it's one in my taste. And yeah, it's not supposed to be inclusive. We already outlined that, and the issue with the artistic democrats and these guys, that this stuff is not meant to be inclusive. It should never be tried to cater.
And even if you're trying to attract if you're trying to commercialize your thing,
Yeah.
the inclusivity, the eyeball shouldn't be your first principle.
No, never.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's always a secondary principle. Yes.
Yeah, the public and private thing.
Yeah, there's a
Yes.
dichotomy. So that's kind of about private. We've talked enough about private. Here's a little summary of it. But public beauty. Now, Mummy, why don't you crash out?
Man, look, I think the lines blurred a little bit often in the private and public thing as well. I'm going to add that distinction where it's like, it's not as simple as art form, but it's like, poetry or movies or whatever. When I really think of public art, what I think of is the great patrons of the past 1,000 years, who incentivize and patronize those great artists that made monuments to their civilization.
Okay.
Right? That made the Shalimar Bagh, that worked in the Mughal Karkhanas and made things for mass consumption.
Yeah.
Right? That made the castles of Europe, that made the Notre Dame, all of that, right? That's what I think of.
Yeah.
Because the idea comes from something that's a bit maybe uncharacteristically sentimental of me, but it is to say that it is not just the privileged who deserve to live in beautiful circumstances, right?
Yeah.
If you're born in squalor,
Yeah.
if you're born in the ditches, right, you will never feel like you deserve better until you see better.
Yes.
Right? So one thing that I see in like developed countries that they do kind of get right is when they intervene in a not so well off neighborhood, and they'll add like a public park or some kind of monument which is actually beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a stick and carrot kind of thing. Usually in Karachi, and it feels horrible to say this, but it's true. A core concern, if you're putting up a public good, a public display of anything, there कोई पान थूक के तो नहीं चला जाएगा.
Yeah.
कोई कचरा तो नहीं फेंकेंगे इधर.
Mm-hmm.
So, to be practical, it has to be a stick and carrot approach where you're like, dude, we're gonna really beautify your neighborhood. We're gonna make you want to live here, make you want to get up every day and look outside your window. And at the same time, if you fuck this up, we're gonna fuck you up.
Yeah.
Right? You go, like, you commission someone very talented, you commission a team of IBS students, to go and beautify a wall in a kachi abadi. Okay? And if someone dares touch it, if someone dares, and by the way, this is not limited to kachi abadis. Yes, like everywhere from defense to any part of the city, there'll be people like, paan thook rahe hain, kya kar rahe hain, right? If anyone touches that, straight fine, right? You don't just get away with it. So there needs to be a certain level of enforcement, which is why, although I'm almost never in favor of bureaucratizing things, I do feel like that public element does, at the very least, involve some level of state patronage.
Okay, got it. So public beauty is
for mass consumption.
It's for mass consumption. So here, it might be better to be inclusive.
Absolutely.
It should be for everybody to enjoy.
And the original precepts we were talking about, the original goods, the biologically predetermined stuff, which everyone is going to find pretty. Like, when you go to like Aga Khan University Hospital, you don't have to be Da Vinci to recognize that it just looks and feels a lot more pleasant than a public hospital.
Yeah.
Right?
course.
It's obvious to you,
Yeah.
right? The same way, you go out into the street, you're able to recognize that the situation, the infrastructure, the looks of a city are degenerating day by day.
Mm-hmm.
So that moral imperative to just improve the conditions in which people live every day, it is impossible to separate it from the moral precepts of people deserve to live good lives, people deserve what is good, and ultimately I'm bringing some bit of it to them through the art.
Got it. Yeah. How do you fit nature into this? Nature, like a mountain or a beach or a nice tree.
Like, if you're that lucky, if you're Islamabad, right, then maybe the public art is simply not cutting down the divine art, which is the trees and the hills.
The building and stuff, right. Like, what do we call it? It's on Constitution Avenue where you
the
have
Supreme
like
Court is our Supreme Court is beautiful. Faisal Mosque is incredible, right? And this is public art. Like if you gave me a trade-off where it's like you take 1,000 Guljis to add to the social fabric of Pakistan, as opposed to one Faisal Mosque, one Shalimar Bagh, I take the latter every single time, right?
Yeah.
If you're privileged, you've got an escape, you can experience beauty in any part of the world. You can buy any painting you want and bring it into your home, right? But as a person, as an average person, when you go out, not only will it give you a certain sense of, I'm more encouraged to claim this place, to treat it as my home, and build that sense of ownership. Yeah. But it's also your cultural identity.
Yeah, like right? The trail. Like I can't see a trail. Like that was. I went to Islamabad a few months ago, and I went on the trail. I went like as further up as I could go, and I don't see Karachiites ever keeping a trail that clean for public consumption. Like it was beautiful. Like the city is clean. People are super conscientious about keeping it that way, and that's what public beauty really does for
our
people
equivalent to that.
It makes people conscientious in a way.
Our equivalent to that would be like sea view.
Yeah.
And look at what we've done to sea view. Yeah. Right? Yeah. So I think those are like perfect parallels. Like we just can't care for it the same way they managed to over there.
Yeah.
But if you put that extra effort in, I think it does reward you in the long run. And then obviously, which we haven't even touched upon yet, there's a civilizational angle. Right?
Yeah.
If you go and see I don't know, the HBL Tower at Teen Talwar. It's a very nice building. Yeah. No hate.
Yeah.
Cool building. Will it ever inspire the same sense of awe in you that the Shalimar Bagh does? Even something as relatively simple and recent as the Minar Pakistan.
Yeah.
Right? It's not as grand or intricate as the stuff that what the subcontinent Muslims have made before.
Yeah.
But
Taj Mahal.
Yeah. But it's still, it has a cultural
as a character, it means something.
It means something to
us.
us.
It's symbol. It unifies us unifies us on a collective level. We are all Pakistanis. It means something to all of us. And I think that's the most important thing about public beauty, public art, is its unifying effect. Nature is not even limited to countries or voluntary groups. It's a universal thing. It's like I can be a commie, you can be a Nazi, we can both agree the Alps are beautiful now.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So public beauty, public art,
nature, art brings in the culture.
Unifying symbol.
Yeah.
At on the fundamental level, there's a unifying symbol that are supposed to guide us towards, man, this is beautiful, this is good, this is true, this is how we are connected to each other.
And the fair hall.
Yeah.
And I actually just thought about this right now. In terms of managing our cultural identity, is the perfect fusion. So you've got this British era relic. It's objectively gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a very nice building. And then you're like, dude, I like the fact this is a very pretty building. I don't like the fact that we were colonized.
Yeah.
How could I possibly rehabilitate this building into the popular imagination of Pakistan? It's been done. The Sadiq mural on the ceiling inside is as quintessentially Pakistani, as quintessentially subcontinental Muslim as it gets. Yeah. Those are all religious verses and divinely inspired art that you see on the ceiling.
Yeah.
Inside this British era building.
Yeah.
Right? And I look at that and, that would also then bring us to the conversation of we've got a pretty complicated cultural legacy. We've also got a pretty complicated cultural landscape right now where most of the soft power and cultural content being brought into our country and all over the world is generated from Western civilization, right? And what treatment do we give it as opposed to the cultural capital that we already have historically?
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to get rid of either.
No.
You need to harness the best from both.
Absolutely.
So, what are the practical steps so people who are not just a bunch of intellectualizing chuds?
Yeah.
How do we fix this?
Okay, so in my viewpoint, right, of course, it would be great if on policy level we could, reiterate how important beauty is for a society, for an individual. It would be great if there was some sort of mass movement about it. But I don't think this is like intuitively, this is not the solution that comes to my mind. Intuitively, the solution that comes to my mind is that we, us, me, you, we need to develop our own authentic personal tastes. And this goes for everyone. I mean, I think that, tasteful people will make tasteful cities and tasteful places to live in. There's a reason why, French art is so renowned. When you think about the most beautiful countries in the world and the most beautiful architectural legacy than even the nature elements of a country, right? You want to say, I'm at France is beautiful, Italy is beautiful, yeah, Japan is beautiful. These countries also tend to be the countries that have some of the greatest works of art, and they emphasize art a lot in their culture. I think this starts with the individual. They are tasteful people. I think that like French people are tasteful, Italian people are very tasteful, Japanese people are very tasteful. There's a reason why people are francophiles, not pakophiles. You get what I mean? So I think the solution to the problem lies in really, really emphasizing on the fact that people should have authentic personal tastes. They should make an effort in developing those authentic personal tastes, not relying on the algorithm, not like sometimes you can use the algorithm, I have a problem with that, but really make effort to find stuff you like. Be conscious. Consciously have things that you find beautiful.
But imagine if there were two guys in Karachi, Pakistan, who started a podcast to encourage people to deep dive into art and really separate the wheat from the chaff and find their authentic artistic
taste. Yeah.
Imagine, bro. Bro, I think that would be pretty cool. I think that's honestly the start of the solution. If you really want to, make it practicable, then I think that's kind of the start of the solution, bro.
Yeah, I mean, I'm doing my part. You're doing your part.
But on a serious note, look, the individual drift or gravitation towards authenticity, I still maintain the view that it has to be inspired by something, there needs to be some umbrella of motion under which all these people get turbocharged. There needs to be some top-down nudge which says, you guys start, within certain confines, start finding yourselves.
Yeah.
Like what that would look like for me, and it's not something I've mapped out in a lot of detail, but bring back the Karkhana. So what did the Mughals do? It was state funded.
Yeah.
Yes, which meant that you had certain limitations. But again, like we've even talked about before, there are limitations everywhere. What is an evolving concept in my mind? I don't dogmatically hold this position, but it seems to me increasingly that the best art, public art at least, comes from those societies which allow a lot of resources to their creatives, as opposed to the ones which allow just blanket the most freedom, right? So, for example,
I think that is intuitively correct.
So, like, take the Soviet Union, right? Yes, we have our issues with the grayness or brutalist architecture, but is it not immediately identifiable with a certain way of life and a certain civilization? Does it not have that strength to invoke certain cultural paradigms which would not be obvious with a lot of cultural art coming out of the West or even the East today. It has that power. It has a symbolic strength.
Yeah, it has a personality. Right?
And you can see that it's an ugly personality. It's a strong personality nonetheless.
Yeah.
Right?
Sure.
And that having that strength of character in itself has some value.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So that kind of, I don't know what a modern Karkhana would look like. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying I've got it all fleshed out, but take Aurangzeb's Karkhana in particular, right? As a successor to, say, Akbar's. Akbar was a lot more syncretic, right? He took both the major faiths at the time, took their influences, kind of merged them and says, make whatever you want.
Yeah.
Just make beauty.
Yeah.
Aurangzeb comes in, he's a lot more orthodox.
Yeah.
He says that I want to sieve this through and get rid of what he thought were foreign influences, and I want to go towards a more traditional form of art.
Yeah.
And and he still managed to create a renaissance in Islamic art in his own time period. The same way people complain a lot about censorship in the 70s in Pakistan. Might be true. That's also the golden age of PTV dramas.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm not advocating for one form of censorship. I'm not advocating for one moral code or the next. Right? What I'm saying is that censorship may not be the
limiting factor
that you think it is.
We've talked about this in the past. No, I agree with you wholeheartedly on that. I do see the merits in what you're saying. Intuitively, I think of the individual, but I think that there's a lot of examples of this, top-down approach working. The Beit al-Hikmat, another great example. The Abbasid Caliphate, the Levant, the Middle East, best artists, polymaths, philosophers, scientists together in one big house of wisdom, and they created, this was the Islamic golden age. You know what I mean? So I totally see the merits in what you're advocating for as well.
And it would be nice to see. Doesn't have to be this uniform, but on a state level, there's a said or unsaid mandate. When you make a bridge, when you make a road, whether it's the smallest embellishment possible, but give me some sign of the civilization we supposedly live in there.
Yeah, I get it.
That's pretty much all I'm asking for at this moment.
Request granted.
Oh, thank you, Arbaaz.